Okay, everybody. Well, first of all, good evening. Because this is streaming to YouTube, I know there's a slight delay. So therefore, I will slightly delay what I say. And there will be a slight delay before my very special guest for Monday evenings joins us. But I think from the looks of it, you folks it's all kicked in. So yeah, so first of all, yes, thank you for all being here with me. And without further ado, let me introduce Count the Woke, and it's Rebecca Butler. Good evening, Rebecca.
Hi, everybody. Jed, shame on you. Absolute shame. Andrew beat you tonight. You need to sign on at lunchtime next week.
You got to get up early, Jed. If you want to be first on these streams, you got to get up. The early bird gets the early worm and all of that. So anyway, yeah. So look, folks, as you join, just a couple of bits from me before, Rebecca, we get into the main meat of the discussion. Just to say to everyone who isn't already doing it, do make sure you follow me over in Parler. I just hit through 50,000 followers today. So that's one in the eye for Twitter. So thank you very much for all those who continue to support me in my absence from the Twitter realm, more or less. And secondly, do make sure you subscribe to the YouTube platform, the David Vance YouTube platform. And also, I might add, do make sure you follow Rebecca on Twitter as well. Do make sure you follow her too, because her thoughts are equally worthy of your attention. So just a couple of bits of that's sort of the housekeeping I wanted to put in front of you before we really kick off. So that said, Rebecca, I was trying to think of what to talk about tonight, because there's not been that much news in the last week. And inevitably, and as we said earlier, I mean, there's only really one game in town. I know there's, in the last few hours, vaccines have reappeared on the agenda and stuff. But frankly, it is the US election, and it's the fallout of the US election, and it's where the US election is going. So just very briefly, Rebecca, my whole thing was I sat up and watched it foolishly. I mean, someone of my age sitting up to the wee hours, it's really not recommended. And I don't think either you or I are in particular night owls, but I managed to make it to 2 a.m. And I went to bed thinking, yeah, this is looking good. Swing states all looked as per what I thought. And then I woke up at 3:30. And I thought, yep, this is good. So I slept a few more hours, got up at 7, and then things started to change. And well, it's been downhill pretty much since then. So that was my experience. What about yourself? Did you watch it live, or what did you do?
Yeah, so I was watching it as much as I could. I took my phone to bed with me, so I had some alerts on, and I kept waking up because I'm an hour ahead of you. I kept sort of waking up every hour or so just to check out the electoral college votes. Yep. But I must say that the real big shocker of news this week is the stock market. Globally, it really is huge news, even bigger than the US election, and nothing to do with the US election as it happens. For those of you that don't know, my son is very up on the markets and does trade. And he texted me this morning at pre-market. And he said, I don't know what's going on, Mum, but there's really big news happening. And of course, we had no idea what it was. Turns out it was the vaccine news. And some of the pre-market institutional investors would have known about that. But goodness me, I mean, the skyrocket on value today is huge, bigger than anybody has seen for a very, very, very long time. So important. Not on an individual basis, but so important on people's pensions. It's desperately important, particularly now that this has happened. So I'm thrilled with that news. But anyway, back to what you were asking me. Yes, big news in the US, and I did follow it. I have followed every word of this. I've been on Twitter. trying to find a network that I like to listen to. Times Radio has currently got my thumbs up. I think they're brilliant. And so, yeah, fascinated by everything that's happening.
I think for me, Rebecca, one of the topics that I wanted you and I to discuss, and I think viewers will enjoy this, it's the pollsters. I wanted to talk a little bit about them with you, because we've been through so much with the pollsters, and we'll remember back to 2016 and the way the pollsters got it wrong over Madam President, Mrs. Clinton. We know that they got it wrong over Brexit. We know that they got it wrong in actually last December. If you remember, here in the UK, they were saying, "Oh, Corbyn could run Boris really close." The pollsters' track record is abysmal, and so it proved last week in the US as well, where they were projecting all these massive leads, mind you, for Biden in states where it turns out that at best it was narrow, and in some cases where it wasn't even plausible at all. Florida, for example, some of the polls were saying Biden had a chance in Florida. He didn't. He never did. That was obvious actually at the very beginning, from the start of election night. So here's my question: How do the pollsters get it so wrong?
Well, I've looked into this this week, because obviously that was something that has struck me as well. And I think you and I did exchange one or two texts about it at the time. So I've looked into it, and I've looked into how pollsters earn their money. And actually pollsters, people like YouGov, for example, they are not political pollsters. They work really more in a marketing capacity, and they do political polling as a PR exercise for private clients to come in and give them business. So they're more interested in polling what deodorant you use, or what characteristics of a deodorant are more important to you. So they would work, say, for Procter and Gamble, just as an example. And so political polling is just like a catch. It's just a little hook that they use to draw the big corporate clients in. And if you look at polling, and I've said this so many times, the sample size is tiny. Now, in the US election, the pollsters were taking 3,500 sample, which is it's nothing. 3,500 is nothing, and they are so unrepresentative. But they are all the media has to work on to create a story, because the media is so desperate for something to say. There are so many media outlets competing in a space where there really is no news, that they've got to say something. So the pollsters will troll out unrepresentative samples, which is why they're always wrong, but they're not contractually obliged to make it right. Some people might say that some pollsters are employed to swing the vote, and this sort of this positive affirmation that human beings like. If somebody else has done it, then you'll do it. So if somebody else has said you prefer Biden, then you'll do it. Or so many people have already voted for Biden, therefore you will go out and vote for Biden. Those will be privately commissioned by the political parties, but by and large, nobody does that.
You see, I mean, essentially, after the 2016 election, the pollsters basically did a mea culpa in the States and said, they realized that the samples were wrong. They had misunderestimated the Trump support, and they would fix that. And I think that lasted for about 6 months, the mea culpa. And yet again, we've got into the exact same cycle, as you say, Rebecca, unrepresentative polls. But unrepresentative polls, which I suggest can help move the dial a little bit, so if you're a Republican in a state where you think, well, maybe Trump has a chance, maybe he doesn't, but oh gosh, the polls are saying he's 10% behind, is it really worth your while going out to vote? Is it really worth your while contributing to the fund? They do have a pernicious impact, I think. What say you?
Well, they do, but I mean, some of your viewers will know that I occasionally go on RT Live. Now, I don't know why I do it, but I don't get paid to go on. But I'll get a text message and it'll say, "Will you come on?" And I'll go, "No, okay, I'm not doing anything else at 5 o'clock, so I will." But this time last year, or just after, actually, they invited me to go. It was actually December the 5th. They invited me to go to their studio. And so I said, yeah, fine. And I was chatting to the producer beforehand. And I said, do you know that today they have just announced a new coronavirus? This is going to really be the big news. You should be covering this story, because that was the day it was announced in the Telegraph. It was a tiny little byline. And they were saying, oh, no, we're just focusing on the general election. So, and how prophetic my words were. But what was funny was that it was my first ever time being interviewed on telly. And so I was sitting there on the sidelines, and Kate Partridge was presenting the program. She's actually a very, very good presenter, very professional, very clever. And so I was sitting there and I was hearing all of this stuff and all the lead up to me going on. I didn't know why I was there. But anyway, they do this segment. They go, and the polls are predicting, 22-seat majority for Boris Johnson. And they quoted some pollsters. And then they said, right, after the break, we've got barrister Rebecca Butler to come and talk to us. And so I went and sat on the stage, camera on me, and she goes, right, polls, tell us about the polls. And I thought, Jesus, I don't know a thing about polling. But I just said, I think the polls are wrong. And she said, why? I said, because they're always wrong.
They're always wrong, yeah.
I'm more in touch with people through Twitter and Facebook and people I meet and speak to, and I think we are heading for a 60-seat majority. So even I was wrong, but at least I was much less wrong.
Closer than the polls.
There's the only poll you can rely on is the one after it's happened, is the actual legal election result. You can't rely on polls. Forget them.
Yeah. No, I think that is true, but I also do think that the influence of the pollsters in the States in this election does warrant some examination. I mean, one of the things that I'd read, I wonder what you think about this, Rebecca. I'd read that the people who work in these polling organizations, who typically are the kind of, the sort of the seaboards from Seattle down to San Diego on one side and from Washington up to New York on the other. They're highly educated. They're well-educated people. Who go into these organizations, and obviously there's a degree of statistical analysis, but there's also a degree of being able to go into, Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, and talk to people there and discern what they actually think they're going to do. And the argument I've heard, which seems credible to me, is perhaps these people don't really, they know how to talk to people in, Madison Avenue, but they might know how to speak to someone in Main Street, Rust Beltsville, Pennsylvania. What do you think to that theory?
Well, again, I looked into it, and they don't actually speak to people anymore. It's not a case of somebody with a clipboard. It isn't even a human being on the end of the phone. What it is a computer. So a computer-generated voice that sounds quite sort of normal, but it's all done by computers. But as I said, the pollsters really aren't interested in the money from the polling. They're not in it for that. They're in it just to get their name known. So they'll make 3,500 phone calls. That's it, maximum. They're not standing on street corners speaking to people. They will target because in America, your telephone number, your first 3 digits will dictate, and those are the ones that they quote as, those will dictate whereabouts you live. So they'll sample Allegheny in Pennsylvania, which is a mountain area, and they'll get 3,500 people from Allegheny, which is probably half the population, and that's the result for Pennsylvania.
Well, I think based on that, Rebecca, I think it's probably very sensible to be cynical about what the pollsters say. But let's then turn our focus to the media. The media, the good old perennial favorites of mine, the media. Now, I didn't realize that the media got to declare who the winner of a presidential election is. Did you know that?
No, they don't.
So that being the case, Rebecca, how come, for example, well, that was an early stages BBC one. I've got, but the BBC went on to declare, no less, that that Joe Biden was the winner of the presidential election. They know that that's not even legal. They know it's not lawful for them. They don't make that call, but they've all made that call. Why is that?
Well, I think it's very, very simple. I think it's quite manipulative, and I think this is the really big story. So they're not calling it. They're calling the likelihood of it. But once there's a concession by the sitting president, then there isn't going to be the raft of legal challenges, which is what they're afraid of. Very afraid of in this case. So they are trying to put pressure on Donald Trump, and they did it early, and lo and behold, Donald Trump has said no. And then there's also been some more fake news out about Melania putting pressure on him, about the family putting pressure on him. They are absolutely not. The American system is so different to ours because the confirmation of the electoral colleges does not come in until the 3rd of December. So exactly a month after the election is when the electoral colleges are confirmed. Because when there is a less than 5% difference in the numbers, then there has to be a recount by law. So, for example, Wisconsin's on a recount. I think is South Dakota on a recount as well. Pennsylvania could potentially be on a recount.
Georgia,
because of the Supreme Court ruling yesterday saying that they couldn't count the additional ballots, so that could put Pennsylvania to another count. So people will remember the Bush-Gore election where the media called for Gore, and then obviously Florida, the hanging chads in Florida, for those that remember, it wasn't for 4 weeks. So that is the statutory time in which the election can be called. So no, the media hasn't called it. They have merely expressed a desire for Trump to hang up his boots, and he's not going to do it.
No, you're right. It's incredibly manipulative, Rebecca. There's no doubt about that. And I can only imagine the pressure on Trump and the Trump team that must have borne down on them, because the media basically were saying, done deal, it's clear, it's a Biden win, be a good sport and accept defeat. And as you say, had he conceded in that, none of these legal challenges would have proceeded. That would have been it, game over. So it's pretty, I find it, I've always been disgusted with the media, but now I'm even more disgusted with the media, because it is, your word is superb in this one, it is manipulation of of the president in particular. And I'm glad, Rebecca, he hasn't conceded. I'm glad. I mean, whilst I've never been made any, apology for the fact that I support President Trump. I do. I support his agenda in particular. However, if he loses lawfully, then that's fine. That's how it is. But there's so many questions about this one. And many of the questions, Rebecca, we dare not ask on YouTube or on Twitter or on Facebook, because those platforms will take you down if you ask those questions. So for me, it's the mainstream media has proven to be the usual nightmare. But Silicon Valley, unlike 2016, it's proven problematical, hasn't it?
Well, big tech has dumped badly today on the stock market. I was really happy to see that happen. They face quite a smashing, but this whole thing about declaring the winner. Statistically, you can make a call because where somebody is compared with how many votes are left. It's simple arithmetic to work that one out. But this is out and out putting pressure on the system. But the American system of democracy is robust. What I really, really object to is the commentators in this country criticizing Donald Trump for demanding that the core principle of democracy is held up, which is that the electorate that casts the vote legally, their vote should count. And yet, of course, we know from very bitter experience that liberals only like a result if it goes their way. And if it doesn't go their way, then suddenly that's not an issue with democracy. It's an issue with the person who's won. So, with Trump, they're just trying to silence him and just shut up all the Labour politicians in Britain. Biden is not your mate, by the way, back of the queue. He's really not your mate. So I'd shut up if I was them. Wait for this very robust American system, which, by the way, is far more robust on voter fraud than ours is, because ours is rife with it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're wide open. But here's the thing. You mentioned the Labour politicians. I'd like to see them shut up. I agree with you. But I'd turn around and say, I'd like to see some Conservatives shut up as well. I'd like to see some of these cringing comments from the likes of, what's her name? I've forgotten her name. The former leader of the House, the Conservative, she ran against Theresa. She ran against.
Leadsom, Andrea Leadsom.
Yes, her. Yes, I seen her saying, Kamala's an inspiration to women all over the world. I think she maybe needs to do a little bit of research into how Kamala made her way up the slippery pole of politics, Rebecca. And in particular, she needs to Google the name of Willie Brown, San Francisco mayor. She needs to maybe do a little bit of research. But some of these other cringing comments from British Conservatives.
What about Margaret Thatcher? Or what about Benazir Bhutto as, world-defining leaders? Indira Gandhi? Why are people so parochial in their thinking? Look at the really big female leaders. Kamala Harris. She is, of the four, she is by and large the intellect out of the whole lot, the whole shenanigans. So, they really are as thick as mints. But at least Kamala Harris has got half a brain. But she's got up the greasy pole just like everybody else has, and she's got skeletons. But I'll applaud her. But was Maggie Thatcher ever a vice anything? No, she wasn't. She was the leader of the party, and she won an absolute barnstormer of an election in '79. Benazir Bhutto, ruled Pakistan extremely well before she got murdered. In fact, she ran it twice. She was obviously General Bhutto's daughter. And then Indira Gandhi, God knows how many years her dynasty lasted. And she, you know, India was a nuclear power under Indira Gandhi. So let's talk about people who've actually done stuff, not this token just because I is black, which she isn't, and she pointed that out. She's black. She's half Tamil.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, I'm surprised Joe Biden hasn't been put forward for a Nobel Peace Prize based on his momentous achievements. Again, from our fake news media, I find them all utterly contemptible, the way the media in particular has portrayed this. And one of the big things of election night in the States, and Fox News has a reputation, or has had a reputation, for being allowing, sort of balanced debate and whatnot. And it was certainly where Republicans would tune in, Rebecca. Fox News is one of the biggest victims of this election, because by their million, Republican supporters, Trump supporters, are turning off. I've encouraged them to turn off because of the outrageous behavior. But then when you look to the board of Fox News and you see, for example, well-known rhinos who are now sitting there, you got to think to yourself, is it that big a surprise? Fox News will perish on what they've done, I believe, but we'll see what happens. And the rest of them,
unless Trump buys them.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I know people are saying Trump, if he is beaten, and he hasn't been beaten yet, but if he was, then could he set up a channel? He could certainly take all the talent that they've got, the likes of the people that I like in it, I think they're going to be like fish out of water in the time ahead. But the media certainly in the States, Fox is one of the big casualties. The BBC here. Rebecca, they never cease to impress me with how low they can get, because their coverage, they were gleeful the next morning. I haven't watched the BBC in 3 days. Can't watch it because it's partisan, it's propagandist, it's not reporting news, and it is misleading. Let's use the words carefully. It is potentially misleading people to think Joe Biden has won when legally and lawfully he has not won. I find that really bad.
Yeah, I mean, if our media truly understood the American constitutional system, which is so sophisticated and clever, they have got brilliant checks and balances in a way that we don't have. They have these midterm elections, which then can reshuffle the order of the House, and they have a first past the post system for the president, which is the electoral college. That's like constituencies, but the House of Congress and the Senate are on the same ballot, but they are counted differently. So the thing is, in America, is now that Mitch McConnell, who's the Republican leader in the Senate, he is the man to watch. That is the guy who is wielding all of the power. Biden can do nothing.
Without him.
The Republican holding in the Senate. Now, Georgia has 2 Senate seats up for election, which is like, because they have this rolling 2-year, 4-year, 3-year, 5-year Senate office, 2 are coming up in Georgia. Now, Georgia could go, if Trump endorses those candidates, Georgia could go Republican, in which case it's an outright majority in the Senate. Now, the casting vote in the Senate actually goes to Kamala Harris. I mean, who knew that? So as the vice president, so they cannot afford any legislation that runs the risk of being offensive to the Supreme Court. 9-6. offensive
Yep.
to the Senate,
Right.
which I think is 5150. And so they've got the very left wing of the party that they now have to bring up to the more centrist Democrats. They're going to struggle. They really are not going to have this, marked agenda that people are worried about. It's just not going to happen. It won't happen.
I think, Rebecca, I really like the fact that you, like me, appreciate the cleverness, the robustness of the US political system. The Electoral College, which of course those on the left would like to see destroyed. It's such the founding fathers were so clever. Here's an idea which means that essentially the big metropolitan super cities don't dominate America. The guy in South Dakota, the guy down in Alabama, they have some influence, and this annoys Democrats, of course, because those areas have consistently not voted for their parties in the main. And so I think it is a genius system, but I think it's a genius system that is right now today being put under massive strain. I wanted to show you a couple of things. I wanted to bring these things up. What do you think about, like, for example, this? You gotta laugh, really. And this is you say. Yeah, imagine 100. One of them's that chap is Jason Daniel, a mere 170, which is interestingly, I think, about 60 years older than the oldest living man on this planet. But nonetheless, he turned out to vote. Were you impressed with the fact that the very very elderly turned out to vote?
He could have written the Constitution. He's old enough. He was born.
I think it's right. He was born in the Civil War. That's right. Yeah.
1776. By a whisper, he could have written the Constitution. I mean, for God's sake. Yeah, here you are. To what extent these would shift the result, I don't know. I really got angry when even the Telegraph said unsubstantiated claims of fraud.
Yeah.
Anybody who even glances at Twitter and Facebook would have seen the hundreds of thousands of testimony, allegations, videos, you name it. Definitely people trying to subvert democracy. Definitely there is evidence, but he hasn't had time to amass the evidence. He hasn't been able to interview all the people to say, right, well, all right, was it just one vote or was it every vote? When you talk about the backdating of these postal ballots, how many? Was it one sack or was it lots of sacks? So these are questions that really only, forensic experts can go and interview the thousands of witnesses. I mean, they set up a hotline at the White House. They set up a hotline and it was jammed with people whistleblowing.
Well, maybe it's because people saw things like this, for example. So there's the Wisconsin turnout, which is apparently nothing to see here, all very normal. And as you can see, it's just recorded without precedent, a massive vote, which is roughly 33% above the historical norm. Now that may be, of course, the case. It may be that Joe Biden has enthused more, for example, American black people to vote for him than Obama did. That is possible, but is it likely?
No, because more black people voted for Trump than voted
That's
for
right.
Biden.
Rebecca, that's such an important point. I'm glad you made it. That because these two things are not, you cannot believe them both You cannot say more black voters have voted for Trump, which seems to be factual, than in 2016. But at the same time, Joe Biden's got this historic black vote. The two things are not possible. I'm afraid they're not. And actually, you mentioned this, and you've spent a lot of your life in the law, and you understand the law. And it seems to me that these matters ultimately are going to have to be decided in the court, probably right the way up to the SCOTUS. And for that, I am extremely grateful that there's now 9 justices sit on the, as you said earlier, 9-6, including Clarence Thomas, Justice Clarence, who was the chap who gave him hell in 1992?
It might be somebody who rhymes with Schmeiden. I don't know.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that's right. Biden, of course, gave Clarence Thomas such. I vaguely remember it at the time. And he's going to be. Now, I believe, of course, that the justices on SCOTUS are people that we can pretty much trust what their judgment is. I think we should have confidence in the highest court in the land. But I wonder what would happen if the highest court in the land did decide that there were substantial issues, which then in consequence could flip states to Trump, which could flip the election. What do you think the consequence of that would be?
Well, you know what? I would love it if that happened. Not because I'm a particular fan of Trump the man, but I'm a big fan of Trump the agenda. And one of his agendas was drain the swamp. And I can feel the whirlpool as the plugs pulled out, as this sort of swirling swamp. Up. I mean, I honestly, what a Christmas present that would be. I don't care if God had to give me a sort of a payback, and he said, right, it's lockdown or Supreme Court of the US determining that all the votes are recounted and Trump came, I would go into quarantine for a whole year just for the pleasure of that moment. Honestly, I could just see him going, that's awesome. This is just fake news. We've drained the swamp. It is awesome. I could just see it. I'd love it.
That would be, but I mean, the fact is 71 odd million Americans have seen an election. I think a lot of them, they think it may have been sort of stolen from them, or they're certainly very unhappy. Let's put it like that. But I haven't seen any riots. I haven't seen any violence against people. I haven't seen buildings being burnt down. I've seen none of that. But I have seen plenty of that in the previous months when BLM Antifa were going around burning down American cities, and apparently that was Trump's fault. Yeah,
well, of course they were concerned that lot were going to riot, which is why the White House was barricaded, because actually the White House was predicting a win. So
that's right.
Look, the reason why the pollsters are wrong, by the way, it's not people are shy to admit they're Trump voters. What a patronizing thing to say. The whole point is that your average Trump voter actually is employed, has a job, isn't answering the phone at 10 o'clock in the morning to a pollster. Your average Trump black voter goes to church on a Sunday, very, very conservative in their social values, very much land of the free, land of the brave, and all of that. Huge patriotic base, people who've been welcomed to America. They see Trump. The Latinos, the Hispanics, they're no different to any other immigrant group that wants to protect what it has worked very hard to achieve. And the Latinos, the Hispanics, the blacks, they're all those people. Middle-class America is huge. It is huge. And it's silent. It goes to work and just brings up its family in the best way it can. So that's why this vocal minority needs to be ignored. We really, really do. So, and the media, it just is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. We knew the media were going to misbehave over this one.
Oh, misbehave is one word for it. But to the point you make, Rebecca, Trump did extremely well with Latinos, with American Black people. In fact, across all ethnicities. I think the only ethnicity where his vote dipped was white people, and in particular, I think it went back in white women, I think. But anyway, he's a strange sort of racist, isn't he? He's an odd racist that minorities love him, but his own race doesn't like him just as much. That's a strange definition of racism. Can you explain that?
Well, you see, the thing with minorities in America, the ones that vote, is they are legal immigrants. They're legally there. They are now, a lot of them are US citizens. Some aren't, but most are. And so there's nothing illegal about them. They've gone there to make their life better. They come from a high work ethic backgrounds normally. And what they've done is they've gone into America, they've made a success of themselves, and they've raised themselves up. And then another migrant group comes in below them and then pushes everybody up. Unfortunately, and this happens in Britain as well, the white indigenous population, the so-called trailer trash, they still sit on their sofa and they complain. They don't actually get out of their beds and do something about it. They haven't got the work ethic of the immigrants. So that is why Trump appeals, because his tax regime was so much in favor. Small enterprise, small individual people opening up their own companies. I mean, I looked into the taxes in America before coming on the show tonight. And, it's staggering what he does for the working people of America. People from India, they don't go to the US to be freeloaders. They go to the US, to Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Brown, they go big and to go large on their careers. So they're going to vote for Trump every day.
Yeah, I mean, there was I wanted to show you this. You may remember the Ukrainian elections back in the early noughties, and I saw this. I wanted to just show you this. This was the problems that the American observers saw in the Ukraine, and as you can see, they were worried about mobile ballot box fraud, Rebecca, computer data allegedly altered, reports of opposition fraud, North Korean style turnout. Now, I read that and I thought, where does that remind me of? And actually, seriously, this is a serious part of the discussion, because I agree. The American system is very robust, but some of the stuff we're seeing, I mean, frankly, it wouldn't have been accepted in the Ukraine. Why the hell should it be accepted in, name your Rust Belt state or swing state?
Accepted. The thing that makes it robust is not that this stuff doesn't happen. Is that when it does happen, because it's a democracy and America has very, very strong protections for free speech, you can't be silenced in America. That you can't be done for going. So that's why it's such a strong democracy, and people know, because of the Dycean system of the state in America, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary are all separate, although with the executive choosing the judiciary, it is slightly muddled on that Dycean system. But the bog standard John Doe in America knows that the courts will uphold their rights, including their right to speak out. So it's a sign of it being a strong democracy that the frauds are being exposed. It's not a sign of a democracy that there aren't frauds, because if there weren't frauds, you'd really worry who was hiding it. As Lenin said, the power is not the vote cast by the electorate. The power is the person who counts them.
And if you put that up on Twitter, Twitter will then fact check it and tell you that, yes, but it's important to understand, he said that in context. But you're dead right, and he knew exactly what he was saying, of course, as well. And also, Rebecca, you know, again, you're spot on. In the States, these things, I think, are being exposed. I mean, there's a couple of things I spotted here. You maybe saw this one. Military ballots were found in the trash in Pennsylvania, and funnily enough, they were all Trump votes. This one, I saw this one. I mean, you have to laugh. You'd have a heart of stone not to laugh. This was censored on Twitter, by the way, but just FYI, 442, we've counted 3.36 million votes. And then, 20 minutes later or so, hang on, we've only counted 3.19. Yeah, it's only a couple of 100,000 votes out. The genius of America, I agree, has been that they've always been able to manage it. And I think pretty much any sort of shenanigans has been exposed, and we got to hope that happens, because we cannot have the world's economic superpower and biggest democracy, although my Indian friends might dispute me saying that, but you know what I mean. We can't have them reduced to the level of the Ukraine. We just can't. That's not tolerable, and that's why I really hope that these legal challenges do proceed in the proper way and the proper time is afforded to them, so that we can be confident that whoever's in the White House, they deserve to be in the White House. And I have to say, Biden's alacrity in accepting something that he himself must know what we've just said concerns me greatly.
Yeah, no, me too. For me, just sort of sum it up, my view of the media and how thoroughly irrelevant and stupid they are. If any of your viewers haven't, I would recommend watching last night's Oscar Pistorius story on, I think it was BBC, and it shows, and this is a bit that's just it's not unique to that story, but this sums up the media to me.
Yeah.
Oscar Pistorius, famous Paralympian, involved in a shooting. Immediately, the editors must have got people on their aeroplanes to fly out to Joburg or Cape Town, wherever it was, fly out and cover the story. What does covering a story actually involve? And if you just watch it, it's brilliant. What does the press pack actually ever achieve? They only ever achieve a picture of a bloke with a coat over his head. And hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of dollars, pounds, euros, whatever currency you want, is spent on thousands of people thronging to get a picture of a bloke with a coat on his head. And the sheer futility of their existence is what I'm doing here. Because frankly, you could be a body double for pretty much anybody and, get a coat over your head. You could be any independent. It's a bloke with a coat over their head every time. Why would you fly people out to take a picture of a bloke with a coat on his head? And I'm really, really dead serious here. I know I'm making a light point. What is the point of the media? What is the point of it?
Oh, well, I mean, I've argued that for some time. I don't think the media has anything positive to contribute. And, I am reminded of Mark Twain's comment way back in the day when he talked about before TV. Obviously, he said, if you don't read the press, then you are uninformed, and if you do read the press, then you are misinformed. And that was before TV, and that's certainly before social media, before Twitter, before Facebook, before even, may I dare say it, YouTube. You know, so yeah, I mean, in a way, plus the change has it. I'm not sure it's changed, but we all need to be aware of it for sure. But yeah, so I think we're moving into a very critical time over the next couple of weeks, Rebecca, where these challenges, you know, will go forward. And one of the guys who's most central is the guy who the media used to love, America's mayor, the guy who was there at 9/11 in New York, and you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, Rudy. And so he became the devil in 2016 when he jumped on the Trump train, and he's been the devil ever since, and he's still the devil now, unfortunately, from as far as the media is concerned. But I actually listened to him being interviewed on Fox. And again, with your legal point you had on, you'll understand this. They were saying the usual media mantra, where's the evidence? You know, you talk about this evidence, where's the evidence? He trots it out. He talks about the affidavits. He talks about what they've got in camera. He talks about clearly evidence. Now, that evidence, Rebecca, could be heard by a court, and then the court might decide, well, actually, yes, but it's not relevant, or the court may decide it's not going to change anything. But surely nobody can say there's no evidence when Giuliani's plainly got a bag load of evidence.
But the answer, if it was me in Giuliani's shoes, I would say, as you are well aware, as members of the press, it's sub judice. It's subject to litigation. I can't possibly tell you what the evidence is, but I can reassure you we have affidavits, we have videos, you know, oral testimony. We've set up a hotline. We've had thousands of calls to it. We are having to investigate every single one of them. No, we're not going to tell you the names of the witnesses. Absolutely not, because you lot will bloody nobble them. It's sub judice. It's a really simple principle of law. You don't reveal your evidence. You can't. Otherwise, the court of public opinion will come to a determination before a judge has even seen the evidence. It's a really simple answer.
But yet, and I see actually Imperial John here puts up the point, whilst Biden is talking about unity, his supporters are creating hit lists of Trump supporters. Now, I'm not sure about hit lists, but it's possible that actually they are. But I find that really worrying that it was an Antifa account, which is apparently just an idea. It's not even a movement, I keep hearing in the media. But, I mean, it goes to your point, Rebecca. So if your name was to enter the public realm as you're the whistleblower, and you said that, Rebecca Butler, I was in Philly and I seen this, that, and the other, and I thought it was wrong, you know, there could be a knock come to your door. It's very frightening. And this reminds me,
a gun to your head.
Or a gun to your head. Yeah. Yeah. And this is the big concern. This is like, you know, this is almost Soviet style tactics that some are employing. And I didn't notice Joe Biden or Kamala Harris disavowing these things.
These lefties are going to be very, 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 very sadly disappointed. This is on a par with wanting Jeremy Corbyn and getting Keir Starmer. Frankly, whatever you may think, Keir Starmer is almost a Tory. Okay, so he's more Tony Blair than he is Corbyn, and it has royally racked off the left-hand side of the Labour Party that Keir Starmer gets the kudos that he does. They hate him. Biden is going to disappoint a lot of people, a huge number. The Senate majority is going to disappoint a lot of people. And in my opinion, if Biden/Kamala want to win a second term, let's be realistic, it'll be her. If they want to win a second term, the only way they're going to do it is by becoming more Republican, not less. They've maxed out their vote by 110% in some cases on the left-hand side. So they're going to have to become a little bit more Republican in order to get some votes, because this election was very, very close. He's more like May than Boris Johnson in terms of what he's got to do to pull the sides together.
But I mean, having said that, I noticed that Biden did say that if, on the premise that he does get in, and I certainly don't accept that as being necessarily what will happen, but he would, what did he say he would do? Oh, yes, he would join the Paris Climate Accord. He would restore funding to China's subsidiary in the World Health Organization. He's been, I think, and I'm not sure if, I don't know what you think about this one, Rebecca, it's maybe a topic for another night, but I don't know that he's terribly pro-Brexit. I think he's potentially pro-EU. I did hear him say on camera on the actual night when a BBC, did you see the BBC interviewer shouting, hey, Mr. Biden, have you any words for the BBC? And he goes, British Broadcasting Corporation, I'm Irish. But, he's problematical, isn't he? And therefore, those in the UK, those conservatives who are saying, oh yeah, I think, yeah, like I've seen so many media commentators in the UK who have shown their true colors in this one, but they're gonna regret it because he ain't their friend.
Well, the Irish connection is very worrying. Now, I've lived in America a couple of times, and the East Coast, Northeast Coast, Boston especially, their allegiance to the IRA was no secret. I mean, the amount of funding that came from there is huge.
What about it?
There's this other bizarre and utterly ridiculous phenomenon in America, which is that there are about 55 million people claim Irish heritage. There are 5 million people in Ireland itself. Joe Biden's connection with Ireland is more NORAID than the IRA, and less to do with the fact that it was his great-grandfather who came from Ireland. I mean, I don't know where my great-grandparents came from. Do you? I haven't a clue where my great-grandparents came from. You'd have to go and find out if you were really interested in it. So
I did. I did, Rebecca. I did my ancestry, and I know exactly where my grandparents and my great-grandparents came from. But that's irrelevant because it's Joe Biden talking about. So, I mean, I just find, I think you're right. Biden will be if he gets in, he'll be a massive disappointment to them. But I also think, given his health and given the issues that I think we do understand, he may not, I mean, the pressures of being president are enormous on a healthy 50-year-old man, never mind a 78-year-old man. So, it's pretty unlikely, I think, that he would serve his 4 years if he does ascend to the White House, and therefore Kamala will become the first Black American president, won't she?
She will. I mean, that's fine. I don't doubt her competence because she's got jack all chance of getting anything through anyway. They're never going to get a left-wing agenda through. Where is America going to get $1 trillion for a carbon neutral economy? Now, Biden supports fracking. Oh, that's not very left-wing, is it? He supports fracking. America is a world leader on things like hydrogen fuel technology and all of the alternatives, but carbon, oil is still necessary for an economy. And in a post-COVID world, where is he going to get the money for his green agenda? Because I tell you what, he's not going to get it past Congress. He's not going to get it past the funding committees. He's not going to get the money. Obama couldn't get Congress to agree to fund the civil service. Do you remember the federal shutdown? Obama lost the federal civil servants for 14 days in the last year of his first term, and he lost 7 days because they couldn't afford to pay their salaries. In what world are they going to afford $1 trillion? It's just pie in the sky. They will say anything to get elected.
Well, that's right. You're absolutely right, Rebecca, and that's the bottom line, and that's how this kind of makes cognitive sense, because they are saying, and they have said whatever they've needed to say to get the votes. But I do find it strange that in Pennsylvania, where there's a huge number of jobs dependent on fracking, we are being asked to believe that those voters turned out for Biden and Kamala, who are both on record as saying that they want to close down fracking. Now, I know Biden's simultaneously in record saying he's in favor of it, but you can't be in favor of both things ultimately in the long run. I suspect nothing will happen there. I probably, again, they'll be disappointed in that. But I do hear today that he has suggested there will be a mandatory mask mandate outdoors for 3 months in the States to fight COVID. But maybe now we've got this vaccine announcement, that may not be necessary. Maybe I saw that an announcement within 1 day of the alleged result that indoor concerts might be allowed again. Gosh, it's funny how an election result can almost provide a cure for COVID. Funny old world, isn't it?
Exactly. And the Pfizer announcement comes now. Is that timing a coincidence? Probably not. He's gonna come down to earth with a really sharp smack when he's got to devise a COVID policy that is that attacks Trump's. Because, to be honest, I was watching the golf yesterday from Texas. No, none of them are socially distanced. They're outside. A handful are wearing masks. No. America is not geared up to this sort of authoritarian style lockdown that we are. So he's going to find that those 70 million Trump supporters are going to need taming, and the only way he's going to tame them is by going on their side. So honestly, he's got an absolute egg on his face in no time at all, if he is the president after January the 20th.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way to sum it up and bring this one to an end, Rebecca. There's a lot more mileage in this story. This story, it isn't over. In some ways, it's only really starting. And as I say, I've kept my sanity by not turning on the mainstream media. I found some degree of sanity amongst social media. There's some things emerged there, which is good. But I think for the way the media has behaved itself since the day after the election has been so sickening that I just hope more and more people tune into stuff like this, tune into other channels, other people, where there's proper conversations, there's degrees of honesty. I think we're honest, and of course you can be wrong. You can say what you believe and being completely wrong, which I often am, by the way. I've never claimed the virtue, a monopoly on being right. But what I'm not is I'm not disingenuous. I won't sit and lie through my teeth. And I think we've seen so much of that over this American election, over COVID, over Brexit, you name it, Rebecca. We've seen the media class, once again, I think, live up to their title of being prostitutes, which I kind of go with, But anyway, listen, thank you very much for being here, Rebecca. It's such a pleasure to see you. Thank all you folks for being on the stream. I hope you're enjoying YouTube. I can't stream to Facebook at the moment. As you may know, my good pals at Facebook took away that privilege. Thanks, Facebook. But happily, I will be putting this up onto Facebook. So you'll be able to watch this on Facebook, or at least all those who follow me on Facebook will as well. But I'm actually sick of Facebook. And I believe November the 11th, Wednesday, is the mass exodus of Republican supporters from Facebook and Twitter. And I do believe it's happening because, apparently, people, your point, Rebecca, I think people underestimate the patriotism of many ordinary Americans. Those people, those Latinos you're talking about, Black people who have worked up and built up for their families and whatnot, and they just don't like what's going on. They don't like the suppression. They don't like Twitter censoring their president. Whether he's right or wrong is irrelevant. They don't like that. And there's going to be a kickback. And that's why, you know, if
Because
you go,
they are being censored. That's what it is. And I saw that Parler today had to deny the fake news put out by Twitter that it was going down the pan or it was shutting down. And the CEO of Parler had to go on and say, actually, I'm still here. There's nothing wrong with us. We're still alive and well.
yeah.
Thanks.
Parler got 2 million new users yesterday, and that is a huge amount of extra bandwidth and extra capacity. I think that's just going to add and add and add. And I think part of that is because people do like to be able to have conversations, Rebecca, without having to watch every word that you say and worrying about, well, if I say this, you know, or if you're someone like me, you said the wrong thing on Twitter. So they just take your head off. Meanwhile, they allow all kinds of vile people, including, you know, Ayatollahs, to say whatever they want. Death to America is okay, but God forbid President Trump should say something that Jack Dorsey finds problematical. So I think we're seeing a mass exodus from Facebook and Twitter, and hopefully Parler will be one place where they can go to, but they can come to other places as well. There are other channels, I think, and ultimately I maybe naively hope that truth ultimately will prevail. And so the right result for me, if all this is that we get an honest result. That's all I seek. I don't seek to denigrate anything beyond that, just an honest result. But there's a lot of questions, and I do have to wonder how someone born the year after the American Civil War was born, was able to vote. Don't know how that one happened. Don't know how so many 90-year-olds have been enthused to get out of the care homes, presumably. And actually, remarkably, Rebecca, these 90-year-olds who were all voting, they were able to get their registration votes on the same day that they registered. Nothing to see there.
Sounds like Tower Hamlets to me, but there you go.
Well, we as you say, and maybe that's for another day. That's a conversation. We in the UK cannot gloat. That's for absolutely certain. Sometimes I think my American friends get annoyed when we sort of talk about these things. They think we're setting ourselves up as holier than thou, but we're really not, are we?
No, absolutely not. No.
Tor Hamlets has it all. Right, folks, that's it. You've had an extra 7 minutes, but never mind. You can't say I don't give you value for money. So listen, Rebecca, thanks again for taking your time this evening. Thank all of you folks for being with me. I've got lots of stuff coming up this week on this channel and elsewhere. So make sure you keep tuning in. And as I say, make sure you follow Rebecca, and we'll catch up with you real soon. Bye for now, and speak soon.